I almost didn't even bother to make this video. Let's just get into it. So, the iPhone SE. The SE has been out for a few months now, but it hasn't really made a splash. From good, but not overwhelmingly great reviews, to complaints about the increased price, to reports Apple's cutting production of the device. It seems like the SE just doesn't have much of a place in today's big phone world. It's an established iPhone, with the newest processor, the same design as the iPhone 8, the same camera system as the iPhone 8, the marginally bigger battery compared to the iPhone 8. For all the people who complain about phones being the same from year to year, this is the best ammunition that they have. But that's kind of the point of this device. Let's go through a day with it, shall we? My day typically starts at 7 in the morning, where I wake up, check for any messages I've gotten over the night, work out a little bit, and then go shower. The small screen of the SE makes this all a little cramped, as while the quality of the screen is decent enough for the price, it's an old LCD. I don't really care for the presence of True Tone, which is the feature that the display can adjust its white point to make the screen look like paper in lighting scenarios, but I just find that it makes the display warmer, and I already find that iPhones have very warm displays, and I'm not a big fan of that. Alright, now that I realized that my window was open and I closed it, let's continue this. The display is good enough for the price. It's a little above 720p, and at normal viewing distances it looks sharp enough. It's just a little cramped, and there isn't the pop you get out of other displays, nor the contrast from an OLED. And with those giant bezels above and below, which are black on all models now, a change from before, you'd really hope for the screen to blend in. Granted, dark mode in iOS isn't really that dark because of all the transparency elements, and so it just looks kind of gray. I don't know, whatever. But after a short shower, time for some breakfast. While making and eating breakfast, I'll normally watch Netflix or YouTube, and on my Pixel I would normally just use that because the screen is big enough. But I found with the SE, I used my iPad to watch my Netflix or YouTube while I was making and eating breakfast because the iPhone SE just felt too small. On the other hand, at least the speakers were decent. There's one bottom firing and one front firing speaker in the earpiece, and they're fine. Mids and highs are, I mean, you can hear them. There isn't really that much bass. This isn't a portable Bluetooth speaker replacement, but for what it is, it's pretty good. It sounded good enough on phone calls, which, yes, I may be a Gen Z, but I still do make phone calls every now and then. Surprise, surprise. And it sounded good enough for those. People could hear me fine, I could hear them fine. I didn't really have any issues with that. Now that it's time to head to school, I finished showering, I'm gonna head off for my day. Depending on the day, I'll walk to class and enjoy the beauty of the arboretum that I walk through. Here, the Bluetooth experience connected to my AirPods is great, as I rarely if ever have issues connecting the SE to my headphones or to my car Bluetooth radio transmitter for that matter. While walking, I'm reminded of why I love compact phones so much. This phone is so easy to slip into a pocket or to use while on the move. It's tiny relative to devices nowadays. The smaller screen, combined with the bigger bezels, push that display upward to where my thumb is, making using this phone as a quick text messaging device or a light Instagram scrolling machine so much easier. While, yes, there are cons to going with the older design and screen of the iPhone 8, the advantage is ease of use. I know so many people who went with an iPhone 8 or an SE as opposed to some of the other iPhones because of the screen size. They like that smaller display. Now that I'm rolling up to class, it's about 9 o'clock, and the battery is down to 90%. That's something that I'll talk about in just a little bit. After my first class, I'll listen to some music over Bluetooth till my next class, which drained the battery down to about 87%, and then I have an hour and a half till my last day of class. After this class, I typically will head down to the cafeteria and get lunch, do some homework, and then either roll out to my job as a student tutor or head on over to fencing. By the time I get done with class, my battery is down to about 50%, which, oddly enough, was excellent for me, rivaling the battery I was even getting out of my much bigger Pixel 6. Now, my thoughts on why I'm getting such good battery are because my use case with the SE is different. Combining the more efficient processor with a more efficient Bluetooth connection and a more efficient data connection, as well as not using the screen as much, I think all give better battery life, especially for the size of this phone. I did turn 5G off because I didn't find any benefit to it, and if I was recommending this device to someone else, I'd also tell them to save their battery and turn off 5G, which is why I feel comfortable telling you this in my review. Regardless, I was worried about the battery on here, and I was worried that it was going to be quite bad, as the 2020 SE was, but I found it to be perfectly good enough to get me through my full day. Speaking of impressive, performance. Yes, throughout the day, performance on the iPhone SE was very impressive. But of course it is, it's the A15 Bionic in here. I mean, Apple's marketing team goes all in on saying how great this chip is. Yet, I will say that as powerful as the SE is, iOS is still very unoptimized. Animations are much slower than I would like, although the physics of them feel very nice. It's just, iOS has many bugs, from notifications running into each other, to mail being marked as read before it's been opened, to live text just not appearing. I will still bemoan the notification center, which feels like a mess of Lego blocks that Apple just dumped on the user and said, hey, go figure out your notifications while you're at it. On the positive side, focus modes were very useful in my time when using the SE, as they really did help me pay attention more to my homework and the things that I wanted to work on. Moving on to software. Of course, some of the vaunted iOS ecosystem traits are present. Like, for example, I swear that AirPods just sound better when used with an iPhone, and the quick switch for AirPods between iOS devices is so nice. Plus, Siri announces and reads notifications to you, which is just a massive convenience when you're doing anything that doesn't let you immediately look at your phone for whatever just pinged you. Apps, especially social media apps, look and perform better on iOS, unless you're an iPad on Instagram, that is. While I do really miss 3D touch, I like that the whole cursor can become a trackpad in text areas. The ability to touch the top of the screen to automatically scroll back to the top of any list is a very underrated feature. I still enjoy the mute toggle switch on the side, and as always, the haptics felt great on this device. I also really appreciated Touch ID, as it makes for a convenient and very quick way of unlocking the phone. Granted, it doesn't work that well when my fingers were sweaty from fencing, but that's kind of to be expected. I still think that the ideal biometric situation is having a fingerprint reader in the power button on the side, as well as facial unlock, for the most seamless type of unlocking. But the iPhone SE just has the fingerprint reader and the home button. This is also my first time using one of the haptic home buttons on an iPhone, and while I like the feeling, I wish it was a little stronger. It didn't quite have the click that I was hoping for. Generally after fencing, I'll do a little more homework, work on some videos for a bit, talk to some friends on Discord, relax for a bit before heading to bed. I've been going to bed with about 40% left. I don't really have screen on times because I find that it's a very difficult metric to use to evaluate, in your case, what battery life might be like for you. If your phone usage is just texting, listening to some Bluetooth, light scrolling on social media, this device will easily power you through the rest of your day. Some other comments about the SE. The camera is decent enough, it supports the photographic styles introduced with the iPhone 13, and picture and video quality are solid. But just like with the screen, this is mainly hardware from 2017 that either can't or Apple won't do things like night mode or portrait mode on non-faces. For the basic point-and-shoot camera that phones have kind of become, yes, it's very good, but just don't go expecting to get the best camera out of the SE for the price. And speaking of not the best for the price, storage. The point of this device is to be another hurrah for the people who really want a basic iPhone, one with the home button. You can't advertise that this device will get you 7 years of software updates and usage for $429 when you can fill up 64 gigabytes of storage in 2 years. But that's Apple's marketing strategy. Apple has devices at nearly every price level possible, but they do what they can to reduce the distinction between certain price brackets to squeeze as much money out of you, the consumer, as possible. I mean, why get the 64 gigabyte option when for just $50 more, you could get one with 128 gigabytes of storage, which you're really gonna need even if most of your stuff lives on in the cloud. So, wrapping all of this up, the iPhone SE embodies the saying, it's an iPhone, more than any other iPhone before it. It does everything well, but nothing particularly great. But that's exactly what it's supposed to do. It's not for me, who enjoys customizing the home screen on my Pixel. It's for my friend who bought an iPhone 8 when it came out instead of the 10 because it was easier, smaller, and cheaper. It's for my brother who doesn't want to think about using his phone. He just wants to use it. If my dad didn't enjoy his Pixel 3a, I'd tell him to get an iPhone SE. If my mom didn't need a iPhone XR, I'd tell her to get the SE. There isn't really much to say about this phone, and that's exactly its charm. It's fairly cheap, it's built well, it'll get updates for years, battery replacements aren't terribly expensive, it's a good device. But so was the SE from 2020, and that actually brings me to my other conclusion, why I almost didn't bother making this video. There's a concept in marketing about the diffusion of innovation, which says that innovations lie on a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum is continuous innovations, or innovations that don't change the way you use or interact with a product. For example, making batteries slightly better, or making cameras slightly sharper. On the other end of the spectrum are discontinuous innovation, or innovations that drastically redefine what a product is or how you use it. Like, for example, the introduction of the very first phone or mobile phone itself. As much as people like to think they like radical change, most people don't. They don't want things to radically get different, because that makes them uncomfortable. They just want a gradual refinement of the product, because that way they still know how to use it, even though it's getting better over time. That is what Apple does best. That small refinement year over year, where you gradually get a better product, but for the most part, you still understand how to use it. So why not just get a cheaper used iPhone SE from 2020 over this one? Sure, if you really plan on using it for 7 years, then yeah, you'll want the newer SE because it'll give you a few more years of updates. But if you just plan on using it for 4, just save yourself some money and get an iPhone SE from 2020 and put the other money towards an Apple Watch or AirPods or something else. Something that'll give you some more of those iOS ecosystem advantages. The new iPhone SE from 2022 is a great phone. It fulfills its purpose, but like that phone, that purpose is growing smaller and smaller every day. Thank you all so much for watching my review of the iPhone SE 2022. If you have any other comments about this device, feel free to leave them down below, as well as any recommendations for what you'd like to see from me in the future. Otherwise, feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. I've been Michael with TECHMB, and I'll see you in the next one.